What's up, YouTube? It's me, Alex, and we're here for a fan casting. It's been a while since I've done one of these, at least on my channel, but I was like, you know what, considering the fact that they are making moves, I'm going to go ahead and just do this video just for funsies and not take it as seriously as I may have done in the past with some of my fan casting, because at this point who I've chosen is not being picked, but I still wanted to share like who I chose. I think I do a good job of casting live action adaptations for things, so I just wanted to share it for funsies. So earlier this year, Until Dawn was announced at being finally adapted into a live action film. I feel like this has been talked about for a long time. Until Dawn is an interactive horror game that came out in 2015, released by Supermassive Games, and I feel like people have been talking about this being adapted into a movie for a very long time. I feel like I've heard it out in the ether, but this year, 2024, is the first time I think I've heard that, okay, it's going to happen. And of course, people have been saying things like, oh, they should bring back the original cast, and while that would be fun, personally, these characters in the game, aren't they like high school seniors, or like they're like early college? They're definitely not adult, and all of the actors who played them in 2015, they're adults. So I think it's a little too much to ask the original actors to reprise their roles from almost 10 years ago now. Like Rami Malek, who is the reason why I even found out about Until Dawn in the first place, because I'm a huge fan of him. He won as an Oscar winner, so can you imagine how much money that they would have to pay him? And I don't think he would return to play Josh. He was fantastic as Josh, but I don't think he would return to play Josh. It would be nice to maybe have some of the actors come back to play other roles, but considering how contained the story is to just basically about 10 characters, you can't really do that as much. So I think the only person who could really reprise their role is Peter Stormare, who played Dr. Hill, which according to some of the articles I've seen, he probably will be reprising his role as Dr. Hill. So with that said, in March, I did a fan cast for Until Dawn, and now I think within the last couple months I've been seeing some casting announcements happening for Until Dawn, and so my fan cast is basically out the window. But for funsies, I'm going to talk about the characters who played them in the game, who I wanted to play them, the research that I did, and then who is currently cast. They are not attached to any particular character yet, but I'm going to share who I think they're going to be playing in the movie. So we're going to jump right into this fan cast. So first things first, I kind of want to get into some of the story beats before I go into the characters and the subsequent casting. So Until Dawn has multiple endings. There's 22 critical choices you can make and about 100 endings that you could have. And so obviously that's too much to do for a movie. That is crazy to do. Like for a game, easy to do, but for a movie, that's insane. So if you've never heard of Clue is a movie that came out like 1985 or 1986 and is a very campy, fun movie based off of the board game of the same name. If you're not familiar with the Clue board game, you should play it. It's my favorite board game. So what Clue did is that because of the way the board game is played, there are chances for different endings. And so when the movie was in theaters, each theater had a different ending. There were 3. They were called something like, this is what could have happened, what about this, and this is what really happened. And so each theater had a different ending. So you would have to travel to different theaters to try to see like all the endings of the movie, which I think is super fun, and it kind of allows the viewers to kind of have a more interactive experience with the movie. So I think Until Dawn can do the same thing, but they would have to take it a step further, because with Until Dawn, there would have to be 3 different cuts of the movie because of how characters die and how they interact with the story as the movie goes on. So that might be a lot. Maybe they should just do 2. That might be a lot, but I think that would keep the spirit of the game and keep the movie interactive with the viewers, because even though the viewers themselves don't get to make the choices as they watch, they may feel like they're kind of more invested in what's going on, or with different characters, because you could watch a version of the movie where somebody dies, but then you watch another version where that person lived. Like, that would be crazy. And then of course when the movie comes out on Blu-ray, you have the different cuts of the film, and it would be fun, I think. So here are my kind of suggestions on what the endings could be. Unless they go straight up slasher where they just kind of kill everybody and just you have a final girl kind of thing, then I feel like this could be more fun. So I have ending 1, where most die. Jessica is killed because Mike didn't make it in time. And don't worry, I'll go into these deaths more later. Ashley investigates Jessica's voice, but remembers at the last second that Mike said that she died, but she is killed by Handigo. Sam fails the don't move in the lodge, and so she's killed. So Mike has to set off the explosion himself. He dies. And then Josh is killed by the Handigo, and then Emily, Matt, and Chris survive. So ending 2 is half survive. So Chris is killed on his way back to the mansion, especially since he hurts his ankle during this sequence after the stranger dies, who of course he always dies in the story, but we could probably change up how he dies because I feel like that's insane. And Matt is killed, probably the hook death. I feel like that death is the hardest one to avoid unless there are certain choices you make in the game which you may not even realize you're making. Emily is caught by the Handigo in her sequence, and she is killed either by the eye gouge or by the meat grinder, which is also crazy. And then Josh can be turned or die. So Jessica, Sam, Ashley, and Mike survive. And then you have, I don't know, the true ending where everyone survives and then Josh is turned into a Wendigo. And that's probably the most happy ending, which I feel like people may not want. I feel like people go to movies like this because they want to see people die. Even though when people are watching playthroughs, they want people to survive. So I don't know, this would go either way, but I feel like that having endings like these where, you know, maybe there's no true ending, they're just different possibilities, and it's up to you as a viewer to decide which ending you prefer. So I don't know, how does that sound? So the other thing I want to get into for Story Beats is Josh's pranks. And so what I think the biggest thing about Josh's pranks in the game is that we don't really understand fully like why he's doing this, because though he's doing the pranks to Chris and Ashley and then Sam specifically, and it's kind of not really understood why he's doing it. Because if we think back to the year prior and you are playing the prologue of the game, everybody except for Josh, Chris, Beth know about the prank, because Sam does know about the prank, but she's not participating. She's trying to find Hannah to stop Hannah from walking into the prank, where everybody else is in on the prank. Chris and Josh were passed out drunk, and Beth was off doing whatever Beth was doing. So Josh is not even targeting everybody else. He's targeting Chris, who's his best friend, who was drunk with him, Ashley, who was involved in the prank, and then he does chase Sam throughout the lodge, even though she was trying to save Hannah. So it's kind of like, well, Josh, what was your plan? And so the game never really goes into any of this. So I think with the movie, they could expand on this more and kind of showcase like what Josh's plans for the others might have been, and like what he was thinking when he set up these little pranks. Because for example, Mike is the one who Hannah liked, and he was willingly going along with trying to get Hannah to undress. And Jess was the one who came up with the plan. Josh sends Mike and Jess off to the lover's cabin to do whatever. I'm assuming that he was going to film them. They were filming Hannah undressing, that he was going to film them having sex and I guess post it. He does call them porn stars, so that could be what he was planning to do, like, you know, a little bit of like embarrassment, I guess. But we don't ever really get that far because the Wendigo stuff starts happening. And then with Emily and Matt, which Emily was dating Mike before, and then Matt was holding the camera, he steals Emily's bag, and Emily and Matt go back down the mountain to try to find her bag, and they have a couple little jump scares and things throughout, like back up the mountain, but like that was kind of it for them. And Sam spends most of the game in a bubble bath until Josh chases her. And I really do think because Josh is attached to her throughout the last year, because she was Hannah's best friend, that he was trying to maybe get her out of the way. But bro, it's crazy. And I do think that Josh, in my interpretation, I think that Josh liked Sam. I don't think it may have been something that was always there, but it could have been something that came out over the year that they were really close. And then as for Chris and Ashley, Chris is Josh's best friend, so it's kind of like, why are you doing this to Chris? But Josh does explain that he was trying to make Chris out to be a hero, because Chris and Ashley, they like each other, but they're not making any moves on their crushes. So he's like, you guys got a trauma bond, basically. And he forces them to trauma bond to, you know, make them make moves in their romance, which is crazy. It is insane. But I think the movie needs to kind of go into more detail about this, because I think the game does a good job with it to an extent. But a movie that's adapting a 20+ hour game into potentially a 2-hour movie, I think that they have a chance to kind of give more of a background on what Josh was thinking, especially since Sam is the only character in the game who can find out that Josh is the psycho and what he's doing and what's going on with him before the actual reveal, if you make the right choices as Sam. So there's a lot of different like story plots and elements that's moving in the game that you only find out if you make the right choices. So because of that, the movie has to be really smart in how they handle some of these story beats. And so I think because Josh's pranks are a big part of the story before we really jump into the Wendigo stuff, I think they really need to hone in on those things and let the viewers know. Like, you don't have to like spell it out for us, because obviously trust your viewers, but that is one of the questions I constantly see people on the internet talk about, is why did Josh Josh target Chris so hard and Sam so hard, and then we didn't see what he had planned for everybody else who was way more involved in the prank. You know, like you get what I'm saying? So I think the movie has an opportunity here to expound on that more. Also, the nature of Josh's pranks, obviously with a horror movie, they love jump scares. They want to make sure they scare the audience and things like that. And I think it's important to make sure that the jump scares are there for Chris, Ashley, and Sam in particular, because they're the ones actually experiencing the pranks. They can really like play it up for them, but be smart in how they scare the audience, if that makes sense. All the Wendigo stuff, I think that can be rightfully scary, but with Josh's pranks, there's a level of terror for the characters, but still kind of have this layer of like, okay, this thing and the Wendigo thing may not be connected. Does this make sense? I hope it does. So that's all I want to kind of really talk about with the story beats for Until Dawn, because I feel like Josh's pranks is probably the most outlier thing for this particular story, because it's more human than it is supernatural compared to like with the Wendigo stuff, and then of course with the alternate endings. So if you are following me and you're still here, let's jump right into the casting and the characters for Until Dawn. So first up, we have Ashley Brown, and Ashley is described in the game to be inquisitive, forthright, and academic, and with a crush on Chris. And personally, watching playthroughs of the game, I was pretty indifferent to Ashley in the beginning, and I feel like I got a little annoyed with her as the game goes on because she is so hysterical. She is actively so scared of everything happening, which I completely understand. If what's happening is traumatizing, it's scary. I get it, Ashley, but oh my god, she's screaming so much. If you were playing this game with friends, then whoever is the most scary person in your group should play Ashley, because they would probably be just as jumpy as she is. Her reactions to everything just makes Josh's pranks seem even more insane because of how she's acting, which, don't get me wrong, when the dummy of Josh is sawed in half and she like, that's crazy. That's some crazy stuff. I totally get it. But I feel like after the reveal of the Wendigos, she doesn't really have much more to do as a character, because her storyline was more involved in the Josh pranks than it is with the Wendigo stuff, even though obviously the Hand-to-Go is trying to kill everybody, so she still can die obviously from the Hand-to-Go, but she doesn't really add much to the story after Josh's pranks and all that stuff is revealed. And honestly, Ashley is probably the character I like the least because of two things that she can do. When I realized that she could be directly responsible for two characters' deaths, whoa boy, I tell you, one of the deaths that she's responsible for is during Josh's pranks. He has them strapped down to tables and there's like saws like over their head, and basically the psycho is forcing Chris to either shoot Ashley or shoot himself. So in the scene, Ashley is screaming for Chris like, "Yo, shoot me, Chris, I can do this for you, shoot me." And so if you as a player choose to point the gun at her, no, Chris, no. And so so in this sequence later, Chris and the stranger go to find Josh after Chris and Mike tie Josh up in the shed because they think that he hurt Jessica. Chris and the stranger go out to find Josh. The stranger dies. Chris ends up getting hurt. He hurts his ankle and he's running back to the lodge, and he's getting to the door, and Ashley's at the door, and he's like, "Ash, open the door, open the door, open the door." And Ashley, she remembers that he pointed the gun at her, and they say she was in shock, and she just lets him die. She doesn't open the door for him. When I saw that, I was like, oh, Ashley. Like, I feel like that is so, like, girl. Because even though Chris can choose to save Josh over her, because it's Josh's prank and he never intends to actually hurt them, she will never know that Chris chose Josh when the saw is there to kill her or kill Josh. She will never know about that because she's not in a vantage point to know that Chris made that decision, because it always kills Josh. So it's like, girl, I can't take it. I can never take it. It's so bad. And then later, after Emily has an awesome sequence in the mines and a mountainside by herself, we find out that she gets bit. If she doesn't have the flare gun, I'll get into that later, but she gets bit by the Hand-to-Go, and Ashley sees the bite and flips out. And mind you, the stranger left his bag of information, and he said that he has been keeping up with information about these things for years. So Ashley sees the bite, freaks out, incites terror, but she's like, "Get out of here, you can't be in here, blah, 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 blah." Like, she just, and then of course she like incites Mike, and he's being extra, and Mike has the opportunity to shoot Emily in the face to kill her because they think she's going to turn into a Wendigo. The stranger's bag is right there. read the freaking book first. What are you doing? And then if the player decides, like whenever I'm watching playthroughs and the player decides to shoot Emily and it's like their first playthrough, I get so mad at them. And then if you have Mike kill Emily, I don't even like Mike anymore because of this. And so this happens regardless, because majority of the time Emily is going to get bit by the Handigo. So this will always most likely happen more often than not. So this just makes me dislike Ashley. Like I can't even. Oh, and then what makes it even worse is that depending on if Mike shoots Emily or not, the look she makes is like so evil to me. I'm sorry. But she can now read the journal of the stranger, and she reads the journal, and we find out that you cannot turn into a Wendigo by being bitten by one. And if Emily is still alive, Ashley has a decision to either share with the group or to not say anything. And of course, if you don't say anything, then that's just like, that is insane. And that just makes it seem like Ashley would be a person who would get bit by a zombie and then not tell anybody. Like, that is just crazy. And if she does tell, then obviously, I'm sorry, she gets what's coming to her, and I'm with Emily on this.
Please, just try to understand. Understand the palm of my hand, bitch.
So it is insane. Like, I cannot believe it. Okay, so I also want to kind of get into everybody's deaths as well. So everybody has multiple deaths in the game, and Ashley can only die in the later half of the game. Like, after all the prank stuff happens, she's never in danger of actually dying until Emily comes back to the lodge, and that is when Ashley has more of a chance to die. Ashley's deaths are: she can investigate Jessica's voice in the mines, and she can open the trap and she'll get her head torn off. She can unlock the door, but then like not actually open it and then still die, and because the Handigo pops out and kills her. And then she can die in the lodge if Sam doesn't choose to save her. She'll get caught by the Handigo and get her eyes gouged out. Or if Sam runs to the switch too early before everybody runs out, then she'll get burned up in the lodge. So that sucks for her. They're pretty avoidable, but you know, who's to say what could happen? You know, maybe she could really be dumb, even though she's described as being smart, but she is also described as inquisitive. So who's to say? So for the casting, so previously in the game, she was played by Galadriel Steinman. Like, I think that she does a good job with Ashley, you know, her terror and just her being so afraid all the time. I mean, she can be really annoying because all she does is ask questions. What guy? What do you mean, Chris? Oh! But she does a good job with all of that. So I feel like whoever plays Ashley needs to keep the same type of terror that she has in the game, because if not, then she's a different character. So I chose Amy Beth McNulty, who I was introduced to her from Anne with an E, where she played Anne Shirley. I really liked that show. Very sad it got canceled, but I thought that Amy Beth was really great. I've only ever seen her as a redhead. I do think she's a natural blonde, but she's been red before. 2 times I've seen her, so she can easily be red for Ashley. And I think that she has like a good balance of being very likable, but also being a little insufferable, because Anne Shirley herself is likable, but also a little insufferable. So I think that Amy Beth has a very good ability to balance those two things. I think that's important for Ashley, because I do think it's really easy to either be indifferent to her or to like her in the beginning and then just maybe dislike her by the end, or people could still love her because they want her and Chris to be together, because she's been through a lot. So I don't know. It really depends on the person. So I think she'd have been a really good choice for Ashley. As for the people who have already been announced to be part of the film, I feel like that Odessa Ozion is the one who would be playing Ashley out of the people who've been announced so far. So editing Alex here, I realized that I said Odessa Azion's name wrong, even though I knew how to say her name. I just froze up on the spot. I'm sorry. Odessa Azion. I'm sorry. Also, love her voice. I was looking at some of her pictures, and I feel like her facial expressions, I feel like she would be great as Ashley. So, I mean, I still like, of course, Amy Beth, but if I'm going off of who's already been cast, I think Odessa Ozion will be the one playing Ashley. So moving on to Emily. We're doing this in alphabetical order by last name. Now we're moving on to Emily Davis, who is described as being intelligent, resourceful, and persuasive. And I think that all of these traits are highlighted throughout the game. There will be some traits I think that are given to us for certain characters that we don't really get to see in the game. So I think the movie should try to like do this a little bit better. But I think all of these for Emily are showcased very well. Emily is very much a character that I think people either hate or love. I don't think there's any middle ground for Emily. And in the beginning of the game, I could totally see why you would hate Emily, because I'm pretty sure I did too. But by the end of the game, I love Emily. Okay. I love her. Yes, she is a bitch, but she is a fun bitch. And I feel like that she has some of the best dialogue and moments in the game. Like, she has one of my favorite scenes in this game. It is so funny. I'm already laughing just thinking about it. But I think with the way that she interacts with other characters, especially Matt, who is her boyfriend now, shows how she just maneuvers him around. Persuasive. I think that just works. And then the other two, her being resourceful and intelligent, really works when she's by herself in the mines. And not to mention, it is her idea to go radio for help to the radio tower. So that just shows how quick on the draw she can be, because Ashley is just like beside herself when Chris and Ashley meet up with Emily and Matt. And Emily's like, okay, we're going to the radio tower. Like, she's on it. And I don't know if she's like student body president. I feel like Mike probably is, but Emily, I can definitely see being somebody who would be really good in the SGA. So I'm just saying. I think because Emily has such a good arc, good narrative storyline throughout the game, that she just becomes one of the best characters in the game. And I think that in a movie, that would be so fun to see, because obviously she can remain kind of an antagonistic character, because she kind of does, but it would make her likable because she's likable in the game. I'm sorry, she is. She's so proactive, and when she comes back to the lodge, it's easy for her to kind of tell them what's going on. You know, Emily's, she's so good. She's so fun. What I do think is really terrible, though, and this kind of dings her, is that depending on what choices Matt makes, she can be so mean about him. It is so crazy. Like, if he doesn't try to save her, she basically is mad at him for abandoning her, even though, like, girl, if he tries to save you and he doesn't have the flare gun, he's gonna die. Like, and then she's like mad at him and he's dead. It is crazy. But the other big thing, though, I think that the game does a detriment to Emily and to Matt and them as a couple, is that the game has a DLC where, while Emily and Matt are gone looking for her bag, we don't see them until Chris and Ashley run into them. And so in the DLC, you have this entire chapter of Emily and Matt on the mountain, and they're talking to each other. It's really cute. They play little pranks on each other, and you see how sweet she is with him, and you see like why he likes her, because as you're playing the game regularly, you're like, why does this guy like her? Because Matt is like, he's like a bland, nice guy. So why does he like Emily? And like, why does she like him outside of the fact that she can control him? So this sequence would be necessary for the movie, in my opinion. I think Emily's a pretty straightforward character, so not a ton to say, I think, about her. But I think Emily has some of the most gruesome deaths in this game, and it's probably because of the fact that Emily was dating Mike, the year before. So the Handigo, who has some of her human faculties from being Hannah Washington, she's taking her particular anger out on Emily because Emily is a bitch and she was dating Mike before. So with Emily's death, she can get caught by the Handigo when she's running through the mines. She can get caught by her and get her eyes gouged out, And if she doesn't have the flare gun, she'll get bit by the Handigo. So then, of course, that leads to her potentially being killed by Mike by getting shot in the face. Or she can be running, and you can choose either climb up the grinder, like the conveyor belt, or to jump off. And if you do the conveyor belt, then you have to make your quick time event, because she has to jump over this pit of a meat grinder, and she turns it on to go up the conveyor belt. So if you miss the jump, then she dies by meat grinder, which is crazy. But if she managed to make that, then you jump off and you take a little zip line down the mountain. And it's insane how Emily survives that. Like, she is so good. Like, the fact that she survives the mines by herself and the mountainside by herself is crazy. So those are her big deaths: eye gouge, meat grinder, shot in the face, and then, of course, she can get killed in the lodge by Sam if Sam doesn't let her escape. And I feel like in the movie they should, depending on what they do, if they want to keep Mike a hero and not complicate him, then they should avoid the scene where he could potentially, where he shoots her in the face. They can still have the sequence happen, but he doesn't shoot her. Because I feel like if you want to keep Mike a hero, then like him doing that, I think dings his character a lot. So her death, if she dies in the movie, I think to make it kind of like, oh, it should be the meat grinder, I think. Because I feel like that's her worst death, in my opinion. Emily is played by Nicole Sakura, and I think she is so good as Emily. Her delivery of her lines, her delivery of my favorite line in this game.
Please, just try to understand. Understand the palm of my hand, bitch.
Is so good. I think she's so funny, and I think she does a really good job of showcasing how selfish Emily is in a lot of ways, because like, girl, what do you mean the Wendigo's coming for you? Matt's in there too. What do you mean? So she's very fun, and I think because Emily can be a character that people either love or hate, they need to have somebody who can do the same in the movie. So my choice, I knew Emily was going to be really hard to cast, so I did like a lot of research, and so I chose Lily Chi, who I'm not really familiar with, but I know she played a young Elektra in Daredevil. Like, I did watch that, and I thought that she was fine in that, and I really liked her vibe when I was looking at videos and clips of her, and so I feel like that she would be fun as Emily, because there could be a sweetness to her when she's dealing with Matt, because if Matt tries to save her in the police interviews, she's asking about him, like, you know, she's like, well, what about Matt? Have you seen him? I wasn't very nice to him. Like, I think it's so good to have that sweetness to her too, and I think that Lily Chi could play that. But I do think they have somebody cast in the movie potentially for Emily, and that is Ji Young Yoo. And I'm not very familiar with her. I was looking at her IMDb, and I don't think I've seen her in anything, but I think she's very cute. And if they're sticking to the archetypes of the character, because Emily is Asian in the game, then just to assume Ji Young Yoo would be playing Emily. And just off of physicality, just she's really pretty, and that's all I can really go off of. I think that she would be one playing Emily in the movie when they officially announce the cast. Okay, so we are now moving on to the final girl of the game, and definitely one of the main heroes, main character I would think of the game, and that is Samantha Sam Giddings. And Sam is described as being diligent, considerate, adventurous, and Hannah's best friend. And I do think all of these things are showcased for her throughout the game. And at the beginning, Sam does know about the prank, but she's just trying to go find Hannah to stop her from walking into the prank. And of course, she doesn't find Hannah in time, because who knows where Hannah is, and the lodge is huge. And so during the year time jump that we don't see, definitely told to us that Sam and Josh were a little closer throughout the year, which makes sense because obviously Hannah is his younger sister and Sam was Hannah's best friend, so it makes sense that they seem to connect with each other over that year time frame. Sam is nice. She seems to be pretty easygoing, that she gets along with everybody. It's kind of hard to see like how they're all friends, like who's friends with who and who knows who, and I think the movie should definitely work on that more. Like, we don't have to like see like how they became friends exactly, because Chris's and Josh's friendship is the only one we are told how they became friends. So we don't really need that exactly to know how everybody else became friends, but I do think it's important to showcase everybody interacting with everybody, because some of the characters we don't really see them interacting with the other characters as much. And because Sam seems to be one of the characters who is probably most liked by everybody, I feel like it would be good to have her interacting with everybody at some point, because she seems to be the most easygoing, and she's the most nice, she's the most empathetic, I think. She's also a pacifist. She tends to want to be a mediator more so than to get into any of the arguments, which is good because that doesn't seem like her character at all. She's very athletic, and I do think some decisions they have her make are stupid, and they only do it to make you see that she's athletic. And I'm just like, okay, because like later in the game when Mike and Sam find Josh, she decides to rock climb out of the mine. I'm like, you don't need to do that. Like, I feel like she didn't have to do it because it doesn't change anything, and I feel like they did it just to show that she can. Like, fine. I like Sam. She's likable. She usually tops people's best character of Until Dawn's list. Like, she's usually in the top 5, top 3, top 2 usually, if she's not number 1. And I like Sam. I do think off of that she would be in my top 5, but I do think Sam is a little boring because that she doesn't get a lot to do character wise, and I do feel like that's kind of like a detriment to her, because we see her interacting with Josh. She's very kind with him. I would love to see more interactions with him. I think that's very important to showcase. And then she's basically gone from the game for like 3 chapters because she's in a bubble bath, and then after that she basically, you know, becomes the second hero next to Mike. And I just feel like that we need to see a little more of her as a character, as a person, before we get to her basically being a badass, and just in my opinion. So with Sam, she does not have the ability to die until chapter 10, and she's the last character that the player gets to play as, and her only death can happen in the lodge. So once everybody runs into the lodge, depending on who's still alive, she has the opportunity to distract the Wendigos, so that way everybody else can run out of the lodge. And depending on who's all alive, that's 4 people who you need to let run out. Chris, if he's still alive, will always run out first, so he will always survive at this point if he's still alive. So once Chris gets into the lodge, he's locked in and he'll survive. You have to wait for Ashley, Emily, and Mike to rush out of the lodge before you're supposed to run to the switch. So if Sam runs to the switch early, then she kills everybody else who's in the lodge except for Chris. And the only way that she can die is that you fail the don't move section. So the don't move is when you're holding your controller and it like violently shakes and you have to try to keep it as still as possible. And if she's caught by the Handigo, then she's basically impaled by Wendigo's claws and she dies, which then leads directly into Mike's death. So that's the only death that Sam has, and I think it's fine to keep that in the movie, that being her only death. People will complain about plot armor because they already complain about it now, but I think it's fine. You know, you could give her opportunity to die earlier in the movie, but I feel like having her be the one to kind of make that last decision would I think works. Yeah, not much to say about it, unfortunately. And she's played by Hayden Panettiere, who's probably one of the most recognizable faces in the game. She's always all of the cover art, and I think she does a good job. I think Hayden Panettiere is very likable. She does a great job as Sam, and I think a lot of her delivery, especially when she's doing emotional scenes or she's doing soft scenes with Josh or with other characters, she does such a good job with that, and I think that is important for whoever plays her going forward to kind of maintain that, because you want Sam to remain a likable character. She may be a little boring to some people, like me to an extent, but you wanted her to remain likable and someone that you root for, someone who you believe is friends with all of these people, someone who you believe would be angry at certain choices that characters make. I think that's important for Sam's character. So I chose Mia Isaac for Sam. I saw one movie with her in it, and I actually really liked her in the movie. The movie itself was not great, had a lot of potential, but when I was watching it, because I was watching it for this reason, to cast her as Sam, and I really felt that she can embody her strength, her empathy, her stubbornness. I feel like all of that stuff that Mia Isaac did very well in that movie, and I think that she would have been great as Sam in a live action movie. And plus, she's also petite, because Hannah Penn's hair is petite, and so Sam is petite. I think it works in that aspect as well. And I feel like that with who I chose for Josh, that they would have had really great chemistry, because I don't want to say that I ship Sam and Josh, but I do kind of, because I feel like that there was a lot of groundwork laid for them having a closeness that I feel like the game should have explored a little bit more. So I think the movie could explore more. So I thought that Mia and who I chose for Josh would have been great in scenes together. So for who's already been announced for the movie, I think Maya Mitchell was recently announced for the movie, and I feel like because she's the most, to me, recognizable name, that she is a shoo-in for Sam. I feel like that she's kind of an obvious choice for Sam. I think she could play Jess, I think she could play Ashley, but I think Maya Mitchell was cast to play Sam, which I think is fine. So moving on to our next person, who is Chris. So Chris Hartley is described as methodical, protective, and humorous, and has a crush on Ashley. I think all of those things are true. We see that throughout the game, and I think that Chris is a likable guy. I do think that he tends to be very corny and sometimes annoying, because I think people who tend to be like jokesters, they take it to another level that I find it annoying. Like, at one point it's like, okay, you're funny, but now you're doing too much, calm down. I think that's kind of what Chris does, particularly in the beginning. And I think it's kind of crazy how after the events of the pranks, and then after watching the stranger die and seeing the Wendigos for the first time, Chris, he's not as involved in the story anymore, because he already went through all of his trauma with the pranks with Josh and Ashley, and that he basically kind of shuts down. So it's kind of funny how him and Ashley, like, they do become closer, kind of. We don't really see them huddled up as much as we did before, but she becomes like hysterical and kind of insidious, and Chris shuts down. So what you see in the beginning of the game and how he's at the end of the game, definitely different. And I feel bad for him, because it's like all of that light that he has kind of like has been extremely dimmed from everything that's happened, which totally makes sense. So I really love how during the pranks, because obviously when you're first playing the game, and of course for Ashley and Chris, they don't know what's going on, and so he's being extremely protective of Ashley. He's not the type of guy who would look at him and go, oh yeah, that guy's a hero. And so him going through these Saul-like traps, he basically becomes a hero, and he's making tough decisions that I'm sure are traumatizing him, and trying to be like methodical in how he handles them, but he's also trying to protect this girl that he liked. But at the same time, he's, you know, in certain parts he's trying to protect his friend, and certain things he has to do that I'm sure is so hard for him to handle, because remember, these characters are like high school seniors or potentially college freshmen. Like, I don't think they're older than 19, honestly. They can't be older than that. It's a lot of that he has to go through, honestly. And so Chris also as a character is extremely important to Josh's storyline, and he also is the character in the game who actually says butterfly effect, because he tells Sam on the way to the lodge that how him and Josh became friends. Boom, butterfly effect. And so I think that's another reason why he's like important to setting up a lot of the stuff of the story, because of the fact that because of his connection to Josh. And I do like that in the game we see a few scenes with him and Josh together, but I would like in the movie to see more, to show like just how close the two of them are. And sure, it's been a year, so I think Chris does make a comment about how him and Josh may not have talked as much. Like, Josh seemed to lean on Sam more than Chris, but I think they should kind of make that a little bit more like showcase in the movie, like they're best friends, but Chris may feel like there's been a rift between them because of this. I think that's important, and it also would showcase like some of Josh's emotions towards Chris when I get to Josh's part. So it's kind of like Chris's character is kind of really wrapped up in Josh's character, and Ashley is like wrapped up in Chris's character. So Chris he is his own character, but he is very wrapped up in a lot of the other characters too. And like, listen to me, I am not trying to downplay anything that Josh did to his friends, but he does make Chris out to be a hero to Ashley. And of course, this does damage Chris's relationship with him. Obviously it would, but it strengthens it with Ashley, which is what Josh's plan was. We also see that Chris is good with the gun. You know, you get your first shooting tutorial with Chris, and he does get to use it later on in the game. In terms of his deaths, he cannot die until chapter 8, I guess, where we find out after Emily comes back to the lodge after escaping the Wendigos, which if she doesn't escape, then they'll learn about the Wendigos from the stranger. But if Emily survives, then they'll find out about something else happening on the mountain from her. So Chris, his deaths can only happen because of choices that Ashley makes. And this is crazy to me. Basically, when after him and the stranger goes to find Josh, the stranger dies. Chris does a little bit of shooting. He ends up hurting his ankle, and he's running back to the lodge. And of course, like I said, with Ashley's part, he can die here because Ashley can refuse to not open the door for him if Chris so happens to point the gun at her, and she won't open the door for him, so he'll be decapitated in front of her, so he can die there. And the last thing he sees is the girl he likes not letting him in. Bro. Because he gets unavoidably hurt. So honestly, they don't want to make Ashley look bad here. Then they can just have him when he gets hurt, that maybe he gets killed because he gets hurt. So if they want him to die and not have Ashley look bad for refusing to open the door for him, then he can die in front of her still, but not because she refused to open the door. Because he got hurt and the Handigo caught up with him. So they could do that instead. If they want to avoid Ashley looking bad. So if he manages to make it into the lodge, basically what happens next is that Josh was taken by the Handigo, and Josh has the key to the lift off the mountain. So Mike is like, well, I'll go back into the mines to find Josh and I'll get the key. And so when Mike runs off, he leaves his freaking gun, first of all, but whatever. They read in the journal that you can't release the Wendigo spirit, so the rest of the group goes after Mike in the mines. And so if Chris and Emily are still alive, then all of them and Ashley and Sam go after Mike. Chris, because he's hurt, if he is left behind, then he can die here off of Ashley's choices. So if Chris is left behind because he's hurt and Ashley goes ahead, if Ashley chooses to investigate the voice and she opens the latch and she's killed, then Chris will die no matter what. So if Ashley is killed because she investigates the voice, then when Chris decides to catch up with the group, you have two choices. You can either rejoin the group or you can investigate the voice. If you investigate the voice, he will find Ashley's beanie and then the Handigo will pop out of the trapdoor and kill him. If he decides to investigate the voice but Ashley didn't open the trapdoor, Chris can open the trapdoor and be killed by the Handigo. I'm pretty sure. If Ashley is killed by the Handigo and Chris chooses to rejoin the group and not investigate the voice, he will still die because the Handigo has been released anyway. So regardless of what happens here, if Ashley dies in this scene because she investigated the voice, Chris will always die. So these are his only deaths that he has, because if he survives the mine situation, then once they get back to the lodge, Chris can't die because he's the first one who runs out of the lodge. So even if Sam decides to run to the switch and nobody else runs out of the lodge, then Chris will always survive regardless. So because there could be situations where Chris is the only survivor. So yeah, hopefully that made sense of how his deaths work. Very complicated, but I think I got all of that right of how that works for Chris. So in the game, Chris is played by Noah Fleiss. I think he does a good job as Chris. I think he does a good job kind of being corny and being funny, and then kind of with some of the emotional scenes he has later with Josh and Ashley, I think he does a good job with. And even when he's mad at Josh, you can see the emotion on his face of wanting to understand his best friend but being conflicted because of what he did to him. And I think he does a really good job with Chris's character. So for my casting, I chose Wyatt Oleff, who you may know from It. He plays Stan the Man, and I think he does a really good job. This would be a very different character from him in that aspect because Stan was very, stoic and very not like Chris. And I think that would be a good difference to see. But He does kind of play a similar character in the show I Am Not Okay With This, that was on Netflix, that was also unjustly canceled after one season, and that character is a little bit more closer to Chris, and so seeing him play that character after seeing him play a stoic Stan in It, I felt like that he would be good with kind of having this corny humor with Chris, and I think that would be fun. And he also doesn't give you, by looking at him, hero, which I think is important for Chris, because you wouldn't look at Chris and go, oh, that guy's a hero, but he basically is one to Ashley, and I think that's important for him to have. So I think Wyatt Olaf would be great for Chris because of that reason. He's a very unassuming guy, and I think that that's what you need for Chris. According to the people who have been announced for the movie, I don't think any of the guys they have announced so far will be playing Chris. I think Chris is still up in the air. So Wyatt Olaf, you guys, get Wyatt for Chris. So next we have Mike Munroe, and Mike definitely is the hero of the game. Him and Sam basically are like the main characters of the game. Mike is described as intelligent, driven, and persuasive, and I think he's supposed to be like class president or something, so I'm assuming he's a senior in high school. And I think that the persuasive part we don't really see much of in the game. The intelligent and driven for sure, but persuasive, not so much. He spends a lot of time by himself, so he doesn't really get a chance to interact with a lot of the other characters to persuade anybody to do anything, compared to like Emily, who was also described as persuasive. Not saying they're going to have these little character like introductions like they do in the game to, you know, in the movie, but it's just the quality that they have for him that I don't think we get to see in the game. Of course, he's also Emily's ex. He was the object of Hannah's affection the year before, and he's currently dating Jess. And so Mike starts off like very goofy. He's like clearly a ladies' man because Emily clearly still has feelings for him, and he kind of like plays into it, but at the same time kind of not. And I feel like that Mike can be unlikable in the beginning because he's kind of just like this douchey guy. People describe him as a jock, but I don't think Mike is necessarily a jock. He's just an athletic guy. So after he and Jess get ousted from the lodge and go to the cabin, you get to kind of see him like as a person, and I feel like he has some really like weird moments. Like even in the year prior, when he basically is talking Hannah into taking off her clothes, he's like, oh yeah. I'm like, ugh. I'm like, ew. And then of course when you get to the cabin with Jess, how he can handle talking to her, and how she wants mood lighting and she wants to feel comfortable and safe, and how he can be a little weird about it. But once Jess is taken out that window, Mike becomes like almost a completely different person, where he becomes a hero. And I end up really liking Mike from this point on, because in the beginning I was kind of like, I'm different to this guy, like whatever. But when he goes after Jess the way he does, and I think that in the movie, unless they're trying to kill Jess early, that he would take all the risky routes and he wouldn't fail the QTEs in the movie. I think that that would really showcase just how like what we're about to see from Mike the rest of the story. And he is the person who finds out all of the stuff about the other Wendigos. Emily, she's the first one who sees the Wendigos, but Mike basically learns like the history of the Wendigos because he's in the sanatorium and in the mines. And I think that's pretty cool. That guy starts learning all of this information. You wouldn't think, outside of being told that he's intelligent, that this particular guy would be the one discovering all of this stuff. He gets to shoot the Wendigos. He gets to come across a couple of wolves. He goes through a super major transformation throughout the game, and I can really see him being a character that viewers, even people who don't know the story, would end up really liking. There are a few times where he does get on my nerves. Like obviously if he shoots Emily in the face because the player chooses for him to shoot her in the face, I immediately dislike him. He won't ever come back from that for me. The thing that makes me mad that he does is when he makes it back to the lodge. He makes it back to the lodge right when Josh has revealed that he was the psycho messing with Sam, Ashley, and Chris. And because Mike doesn't know what's going on, he thinks that Josh is the one who hurt Jess. And I'm just like, Mike, think. You're supposed to be intelligent. Think, McFly. Think. You think that Josh, look at Josh. He's not more athletic than you. Like Josh is a kind of a big guy, but he does not look like he's like super athletic to me anyway. Like I guess he kind of is, like, but not. Like I feel like Mike could probably take him. Look at Josh. Do you think that Josh was able to pull Jessica through that window like that and to stay leagues ahead of you while pulling a screaming and squirming girl through the snow to the point where you never caught up with them until you got into the little elevator room? Josh, Mike, like it makes me so mad that he thinks that Josh would do that, and like that he could do it. And when Josh is like, I don't remember hurting her, it's just like, come on, Mike, I know you're mad, but come on. Come on. Like, it just, to me, is so silly. It's so silly. It's so silly. Oh, and the other thing that he does that can make me mad is when he comes to the wolf. So you meet a black and white wolf, and he actually gets to interact with the white wolf. So one of the things you're told in the game, because obviously butterfly effect, so your choices matter. So one of the things you get told is that sometimes doing nothing is the best course of action. And so there's a point where Mike can hit or kick the wolf, and so the little cursor goes onto the wolf and it has a little timer. Why would you kick the wolf? Why would you do it? It's a wolf. To me, that's insane. Even outside of like, oh, I don't care about animals, but why would you kick a wolf that's standing literally 2 feet in front of you? So if Mike kicks the wolf, I don't like him for that. And then of course the wolf doesn't help him, I think, later in the game. But if you don't hit the wolf, later the wolf becomes your companion. And at some point, I think the wolf can die a couple times in this game. I think off of Mike's decisions. The first decision, I don't really remember what it is, but I think the wolf can die if Mike doesn't do something. But the biggest thing is that when they run into a room, if Mike doesn't barricade the door and he jumps down into the hole, the wolf doesn't go with him. So if he doesn't barricade the door, then the Wendigos get into the room and then kill the wolf. And I'm always like, no, because why wouldn't you barricade the door? Barricade the door. Like, so he can make some stupid decisions. Also, the same thing with the little hand waving trap, because why would you go touch that? Why would you go touch that? Obviously, as the player, you find totems. I haven't mentioned these at all, but you find totems throughout the game where it kind of gives you hints, and it's kind of up to you to interpret how they're, like, what they're trying to tell you, because each totem has different colors and each color has different meanings. I'll put it on the screen so you can just pause and read what the different meanings are. So some of them you can see like hints, and you may think that they're telling you to go to that thing, but come on, obvious trap of a waving hand. Obvious trap. Because if he touches the hand, then he gets caught in a bear trap, and these 2 fingers, I think, are caught in the bear trap. So if he can try to pry it open with the machete, but he loses the machete. If he does it, he keeps his fingers, but he loses the machete, which is very useful. Or he can decide to amputate his fingers, which then he loses 2 fingers. Just don't do it at all. He won't have to worry. He has his machete, he has his fingers. Like, it's just, don't do it at all. It's so stupid. It's so stupid. But yeah, I think if they want to keep Mike a hero, certain decisions that he gets to make in the game, they shouldn't have him make in the movie, because like it would make him unlikable in a lot of people's eyes. Like, people will probably look at it and go, oh well, he made the best decision. But if he kills Emily and you find out that the bite is not infectious, like, that really dings him and Ashley. And if you don't want that to happen, then don't have him make those decisions. There are certain things that you can do for Mike to kind of make him take missteps without making him look necessarily bad, if you want to keep him to be the hero, you know? So along with Sam, Mike is the only other character who can't die until the lodge sequence. So him and Sam have the most armorous plot armor ever. And so once they get to the lodge, basically what ends up happening is that the Handigo and the minor Wendigos are all in the lodge. And so Chris, if he's still alive, he runs out of the lodge regardless, so he will always survive if he's made it to this point. Mike sees that the Wendigos have fallen on the gas line by the fireplace, and so him and Sam kind of make like eye contact. And so Mike sneaks over to like a light bulb and he breaks the light bulb, so the little filament is exposed. And so they also realize, oh, there's a light switch by the front door that we can escape out of. So if Sam runs to the light switch, because you're now playing as Sam, if Sam runs to the light switch and the only person who is run out of the lodge is Chris, then Mike, Hannah, Emily all will die in the lodge by the fire. If Sam chooses to save Ashley, save Emily, and Emily and Ashley run out of the lodge, but then Sam is caught by the Handigo, then Mike can die setting off the fire himself. So he basically kamikazes himself and blows up the lodge with himself in it. So that can happen for his death. And then the other way he can die is that if Sam doesn't, I think you have it's timed. So if Sam doesn't choose to save Mike because the time runs out, then the Handigo finds him. She grabs him like by the head, slashes him across the stomach, and then like slams him against like a pillar, and he basically dies in this sequence. So he has like 3 deaths technically. He can die because Sam doesn't let him escape. He dies because Sam doesn't save him, and then he dies because Sam dies and he kamikazes himself. So that's how Mike can die. So I feel like if Mike is to die in the movie, then it should be because Sam dies and he has to kamikaze himself. Because I feel like Sam choosing to not save him is a detriment to her character. So there are certain things that they would have to be careful of if they don't want to ruin how some of the characters come across. And because Sam and Mike are like the most popular characters from this game, you know, they're usually the top 2 of people's top 10 whatever character list for this game. If they don't want to ruin their characters and they want them to die, then Sam would need to die and then Mike would need to kamikaze himself. Or they both survive. So that's just my opinion. So Mike is played by Brett Dalton, and I think it's so funny because when he first popped on the screen, I said, how old are these people supposed to be? Because this guy looks old to me. Like, I'm pretty sure they're supposed to be high school seniors, and this man looks like he's 30. And Brett Dalton looks like an adult, because when I watched like the behind the scenes, I'm like, this man is an adult. When I later saw him in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I was like, this man is an adult. You want me to believe that this man played a teenager in Until Dawn? Please, okay? But he does a good job as Mike. He's very much your hero dude. He's your macho, corny, athletic ladies man, the one that everybody likes kind of guy. I think he does a good job with that, and I think whoever plays Mike going forward would need to kind of maintain that. These characters are complicated characters. They're nuanced characters a lot of the times, majority of them. So I think Mike is a character who we want to see a visible arc throughout the movie, and I think we do see that in the game. So whoever plays him in the movie needs to be able to kind of do the same thing, but keep Mike likable, unless the intention is to make him unlikable by having him make crazy decisions. So my choice for Mike was Asher Angel, because I like Asher Angel. I've only ever seen him in the Shazam movies, which would be great because the guy who directed the Shazam movies, David F. Sandberg, is directing this movie. So he knows Asher. So come on, he's right there, David. Just saying. But I feel like Asher Angel didn't get a lot to do in Shazam 2. Like, don't even get me started. And I really liked him as, what's that boy's name? Billy. I liked him a lot as Billy, and I feel like that he would be great as Mike. Like, he is tall, he's handsome. I feel like that he would be very charming, and I feel like that in the beginning you kind of be like, oh, this guy's kind of like, but into the movie you're like, this guy is awesome, he's a hero. And I think that Asher Angel will be able to play that very, very well. According to who's been casted so far, there are 2 guys who are casted in the movie, and I think that one of them could be Mike. We have Michael Cimino, who I haven't seen him in anything, but I know he's most notably from Love, Victor, and then I think Never Have I Ever, and then Belmont Cameli, and I feel like he's probably the one I can see playing Mike. He's been in a few things so far. Like, he was in that Saved by the Bell reboot show they did, and he was in this movie called Along for the Ride, which I think is on my list to watch, so I get to like see him as an actor. But I feel like just going off of looks that he would be the one who's playing Mike. I think. I'll be very surprised if I'm wrong, though I think it should be Asher Angel, but whatever. We are moving on to Jess Riley. Jess is described as confident, trusting, and irreverent, and I have to say, I like Jess. I think people also tend to dislike Jess, which totally understand it, but I like Jess. I think it's really rough in the beginning with her because of the fact that she is being very bitchy. Like, her and Emily are getting into arguments constantly, and maybe the way she talks, and maybe the way she's kind of acting around Mike, that maybe you're kind of like, this girl is trying way too hard. So I think it's easy to like dislike her in the beginning. Not to mention, it was her idea for the prank, which is also crazy because she's like, this prank is for my girl Emily, but a year later she is now dating Mike, who is Emily's ex-boyfriend, and Jess and Emily used to be, I think, the closest of their friend group. So it's so crazy. It's crazy. But she is actually the first person that the Handigo goes after. So after an argument between Emily and Jess, which, by the way, Emily, she owns Jessica in this argument, by the way. After the argument between Emily and Jessica, and potentially an argument between Mike and Matt, Josh sends Jessica and Mike away to the lover's cabin, and you get to basically play as Mike, but you basically have time alone with Jess where you can scare her, you talk to her, and you're just making your trek through the mountains to this cabin that's like 50 million yards away from the lodge. And so once you get to the cabin, they have like conversations where Jess gets to be a little bit more human. It shows that she is kind of putting on this facade of being this super hot, sexy babe, but she actually is a little self-conscious. And depending on how well you did with Mike and being understanding to her throughout this sequence, you have different levels of comfortability that Jess has with Mike. So if you do a great job with interacting with her as Mike, then at a certain point of this sequence, she basically undresses and she's in her bra and underwear. If you do pretty okay, she takes off her big jacket and she's wearing her shirt and jeans and her shoes are off. And if you don't do a good job, then she's still in her full snow covered clothes. So depending on how you play as Mike, those are your levels of comfortability for Jess. And I think because Jess is your typical kind of like damsel in distress in the game, because she is yanked out of the game literally, and then you don't see her again until like chapter 9 or 10. And I feel like that the movie, if you're gonna do that same thing, then just kill her early, I think. But because I feel like Jess goes through a lot, I personally want her to live by the end, so I'm getting ahead of myself. So her and Mike are in the cabin, and you see that something is watching them. She loses her phone at some point. I don't remember if she always loses it, because there's a point where she loses it because Mike scares her and she falls into like the little creek and she loses it there. And so while her and Mike are fooling around, her phone gets thrown in through the window. And so she thinks that it is their friends messing with them. So she runs outside and she just goes on this whole tirade about her and Mike are going to sleep together and they can F off and all this stuff like that. And there's something clearly watching her. And so after she goes off her little tirade, she closes the door and she's standing in front of the window. The first time I saw this, I was like, girl, you're standing by the window. Get away, get away. And literally she just gets yanked out of the window. It is such an iconic moment that I feel like it needs to be in the movie because it is insane. So now you have the sequence again as Mike where you are tasked to chase after Jessica. And so Mike grabs the rifle and a lantern and he's just in a tank top and some jeans and he's running after Jessica, who is screaming for help. And Mike is still like pretty far away from them. And so during the sequence, you have to choose to either take all of the safe routes or the risky routes. If you take all of the safe routes and you fail your QTEs, by the time you catch up to Jessica, then she'll be dead. If you take all the risky routes and you miss your QTEs, I think she still dies. I think the biggest thing here is don't mess up your QTEs and you take the risky path. So you want to have a flawless run after her. And so if you manage to catch up to her and she's still alive, she falls because he catches up to her. The hand to go doesn't have a chance to kill her. So she falls elevator shaft and then the shaft falls. And so Mike now thinks she's dead because I would think she's probably dead too, but she's just really, really hurt. And what I think really sucks for Jess is that because she's literally yanked out of the game, she doesn't know what's going on. Like she has no idea what this creature is. She doesn't know that it's Hannah. She doesn't know anything. So at the end of the game, if she manages to survive by the end, then when the police are talking to her, like she can't say anything because she doesn't know what's going on. It's insane. And I feel like the movie should handle her a little bit better, like give her a few more scenes, have her connect with Mike more. I think that the scene where she talks to him about how she feels on the inside, I think that should be in the movie no matter what. It will humanize her. And I think that's important because yes, it's hard to like her in the beginning, but by the end of the game, I always feel so bad for her that I get unreasonably mad when people kill her in their first playthrough. So speaking of deaths, like I said, if Mike fails the QTEs and he takes safe paths, then by the time he catches up to Jessica, she's dead because the hand to go has pulled her jaw off. So she dies early on in the game. I remember reading that was the developer's intention, was to kill her early and she was going to be dead no matter what. And I like the fact that they changed it. But in the movie, they could kill her no matter what. But I think that kind of sucks. But if they decide to do that, it makes sense. That's her first death. She's the first one of the group who can die early. So if she manages to survive this chase sequence, then we don't see her again until the end when she wakes up in the mines. And depending on her state of undress, she will find a jacket and some boots and put them on. But if she's still in her full jacket and her own snow boots, then she'll just wear that. If Matt is still alive, then she'll meet up with him and then they have to survive together. So if Matt is still alive and they're together, Matt makes the choices to either run or to hide. And if Matt chooses to run, then the hand to go will catch up to them because Jess can't run and she'll be caught and she'll get her jaw ripped off. If they choose to hide but Matt fails the QTE, then they'll be caught and they both die. If they stay together and then on the last QTE, if that's failed, then they'll both die. So Jess's life basically depends on Mike and Matt. Their decisions is what keeps Jess alive. And I feel like whenever I see people play the game and as Matt, which I'll talk about this when we get to Matt's section, if as Matt they choose to run or to abandon her, I get so angry. I get so mad because I feel so bad for her. Don't get me wrong, what she did was so wrong and so mean, but I feel so bad for her because good lord, the way she looks, she's so battered by the end. I just feel so bad for her and I just end up liking her. I just want her to live. So Jess is played by Megan Martin, who as soon as I started watching the game, I was like, oh my god, I know that girl. And Megan Martin, of course, is Tess in Camp Rock. Too cool to love you. Whatever, Major Loser. I could just scratch myself. She's played by Megan Martin. I think she does a good job with Jess's delivery. She very much has like this kind of like, yeah, like Jess is like the kind of girl who she's so like, oh my, like, oh yeah. And she's like a little vocal fry going on. Like Jess is very much a character that when you watch, like when you see her or you see somebody like her, you're like, oh my God, this person. And I think Megan Martin does a really great job with that. When we see Jess again later, when she's all battered and injured, Megan changes her body language with the motion capture. She changes her voice, and I think she does such a good job with that. And one of the most haunting things, and I always kind of like chills when it happens, is in the police interviews, if Ashley is still alive, Ashley tells the police that she hurt Jess in the mines and she feels bad for ignoring her. And the police tells Jess about that, and Jess is like, no, not me. And the way she says it and the way she's looking is just like, she's like, no, it wasn't me. And I'm like, that's how you know, like, girl, actually, you avoided death like by this much, girl. And Megan does such a good job as Jess, the character that you love to hate in the beginning, and then potentially you like her by the end. She's different from Emily, where Emily kind of remains hateful throughout the entire game. But with Jess, I feel like people tend to soften up to her by the end because you feel bad for her. I know I do. Like I said, I get unreasonably mad if I watch playthroughs and people kill her because they're dumb. I'm sorry. Unless you're going for like a trophy where you're trying to kill characters, I get so mad. For Jess, you need to have somebody who can be this irreverent person, care what everybody else thinks about her, but there's also this vulnerability to her. I think that is very important to have. I chose Meg Donnelly for Jess. I have not watched what she's most known for, which is Zombies, but I was looking at blonde actresses and I was like, oh, I like this girl's face. She has a very nice face. And so I went looking for like, you know, scenes of her, and I just feel like that she would be really good. I feel like she has a vulnerability to her that I think Jess needs to have, but also someone who put on a mask to showcase that she's not as vulnerable as she actually is. And I think that from what I was able to see, that Meg Donnelly will be able to do that very well for Jessica, and also having that splash of bitchiness that I think is important for her. So in the official cast that has been announced, I don't think anybody who they've casted so far would be playing Jessica. Like I could see Maya Mitchell playing her just to be kind of different, but I don't think that Maya, like I said before, I think she's being cast as Sam. So the people who they've casted so far, I don't think any of them will be playing Jessica, in my opinion. Meg Donnelly, you guys. Get Meg, tap Meg, call her now. Next up, we have Matt Taylor, and Matt is described as motivated, ambitious, and active, and he is Emily's new boyfriend. Matt is definitely the jock of the group, and Jordan Fisher, who plays him, described him as a meathead, which I think is pretty accurate, but in a nice way. I would also kind of consider Matt like a little bit of a himbo. But like, you know, because the himbos, they may not be the smartest in the bunch, but they're usually very nice. So I think that's Matt. He is a nice guy, he's pretty chill, and he only really gets upset in the game if he sees that Emily and Mike are hugged up because Ashley tells him to look through the telescope. Because if he doesn't look, then he doesn't really have any reason to be mad at Mike in the lodge. Emily and Jess are the reasons why Mike and Jess get ousted from the lodge as opposed to him and Mike. He still, I think, can argue with Mike because he's trying to stop the argument kind of situation, but I think it's not as bad as it is before because he doesn't know that Emily and Mike were hugged up if he doesn't look through the telescope. And throughout the game, you're kind of like wondering, like, why is this guy with Emily? Because she's so mean to him, like and he's just kind of taking it. It's like, Matt, stand up, fight back, like, come on. He's a pushover. And I feel like that he doesn't get a lot of character to show throughout the game because when him and Emily go back down the mountain to find her bag, he's gone from the game. And then you have one sequence with him and Emily in the radio tower. And then once that happens, he's not in the game until like chapter 10. So you don't see him for a large portion of the game. Similarly with me mentioning it for Emily, that DLC that they removed from the actual cut of the game where him and Emily get to see them as a couple, that should be in the movie because it would inform who Matt is as a person because we don't get to know him a lot other than the fact that he's a nice guy who's being a pushover from his girlfriend. And I feel like that kind of ruins people getting attached to him as a person because we don't really get to know him. And I think that really sucks because he's a nice guy. Some of the traits that they say for him being motivated, ambitious, and active. Like, obviously he's active, he's a jock, clearly. But the other two, we kind of see, but like not really because a lot of times he's being like maneuvered by Emily. And if you as a player do choose to have him kind of stand up to her, that's cool. But in some ways, he still kind of gets a little steamrolled by her. The only time he doesn't really get steamrolled by her is in the mines on the radio tower. Similar to Jess, he doesn't really have a lot of impact on the story because like I said, he's gone for majority of the game. The only impact he really has is helping Emily get to the radio tower and then helping Jess survive at the end if she's still alive. But it doesn't really matter if either of them survive because neither one of them have any type of stake in the story that's going on. You just want them to survive because stuff is happening to them and Jess doesn't know what's going on, and then Matt is separated from his friends. So it's kind of like you kill them. It's like, well, you might forget about them anyway because in the game forgets about them. And it just really sucks that Matt, being the only black character in the game, is just largely gone. And when it comes to his death, I don't appreciate how I think Matt is the easiest person to kill. He has probably the most death options. Certain choices he makes, I think, are out of character for him. And I just feel like he's the hardest person to keep alive. Like, it's insane. So his first death can happen when him and Emily are going to the radio tower. And they end up going to the cliff where Beth and Hannah are in the beginning of the game, and they end up getting surrounded by a bunch of elk. He has an axe because they went to the lift station first and they find an axe. He has the axe, and so you as a player can have him attack the elk. And similar to Mike, sometimes it's best to not do anything so the little timer thing runs out. It's the same thing with Emily, the little timer thing runs out. So if you decide to not do anything and the timer runs out, then they are able to make it through the elk. But if you choose for some reason for Matt to attack the elk, he kills the elk, and then all the other elk basically push him off of the mountain and he holding on to the edge. Like, why would you do this in the first place, Matt? And so if you fail the QTEs, then he'll fall and he'll bash his face in on a rock. And then now Emily's just by herself now because he died. I don't think Matt would do this in the first place. So stupid. So that's his first death. His second death, this one is the hardest one to avoid. So strap in, guys. So when Emily's just going to the radio tower, if he agrees with her, more than likely he's probably going to die. If he disagrees, he has a higher chance of surviving past this point. Okay, so they go to the radio tower. Emily finds a flare gun. So if Matt agreed to go with Emily to the radio tower, then when she finds the flare gun, you can choose as Emily to either keep it or give it to him. If she keeps it, then of course he doesn't have it. But if she gives it to him, then he will immediately fire it into the air. Which, why? There's no one there who can see your flare. I keep looking up here, but I'm looking at my light as opposed to the camera. Sorry. But so if you agree with Emily and she decides to give Matt the flare gun, he fires it off and then no one has the flare gun. Okay? So stay with me here. If he doesn't agree with her to go to the radio tower and she chooses to give Matt the flare gun, then Matt will put it in his pocket. Okay? At some point, the Handigo, she breaks the line on the radio tower, so now the radio tower is falling into the mines. Emily is hanging off the edge, and so Matt is in a better vantage point to save her. So they kind of get into a little bit of argument. So if Matt saw Emily and Mike hugging up earlier, then you can choose to have him bring it up. And if he brings it up, it causes an argument, and then Emily kind of realizes, like, oh shit, my boyfriend's not going to help me until we talk about this. Even though this is not the right time to talk about this, they still have to talk about it. And she kind of like apologize to him. It could be a good moment technically, but it's just like it's not the time and place. Radio tower is slowly falling into the mines. So if Matt has the flare gun and he chooses to save Emily both times the option comes up instead of jumping to safety, he will always fail to save her because she'll always fall, but he'll manage at the last second to jump off. But because he's now lower in the mines, he is now in danger. But if he has the flare gun, when he gets attacked by the mysterious creature that we haven't seen yet, then he has the flare gun to shoot it at his attacker. Okay? And he only has the flare gun if you don't agree with Emily to go to the radio tower and if Emily gives Matt the flare gun. Are you following me, okay? So in order for Matt to survive the situation, the events are: disagree with Emily. Emily gives Matt the flare gun. You can either choose to save her 2 times, so that way she's not mad at you at the end of the game, because you abandoned her. Choose to save her 2 times, and then you have the flare gun to shoot your attacker. Okay? Everything else can be the same, but if he chooses to jump to safety instead of saving Emily, then he's never in danger in the first place, but now Emily is in danger. Okay? Following me, right? Whew, I tell you. If you agree with Emily to go to the radio tower, Emily gives Matt the flare gun or she keeps it. Matt either fires off the flare gun or he doesn't have it. If you choose to save Emily both times because you're keeping Matt agreeable, when he falls that last time, because Emily will fall no matter what, when he's attacked, he's going to die. He's attacked and he is put on a meat hook and he drowns in his blood. So it's very complicated of how you save Matt in this situation. So if you don't have the flare gun, then you just choose to not save Emily, because if you keep waiting for the radio tower to fall further and further into the mines, then he'll be closer and closer to being caught by the hand to go. But if you choose to not save Emily, then she's going to be mad at him at the end of the story. He abandoned me. Oh, he's a terrible boyfriend. Blah, 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 blah. So that's how that works. If he doesn't have the flare gun, for whatever reason, then and he jumps to safety, then he's never in danger. So that's how Matt dies. Hopefully you followed me on that because it's crazy. It's crazy. I think people tend to unintentionally kill Matt here. So then we don't see him again. After this, either he dies or he survives. We don't see him again until the end where he meets up with Jess. If he meets up with Jess, then obviously he can die here because they get caught by the hand to go and he gets his face bashed in. Like, it's so bad. I'm like, oh my God. It's so, like, the deaths are so crazy in this game. This is also where I feel like Matt makes out of character decisions, because when he's with Jess, you can look at her and tell that she cannot run in the same way that Matt can. And so if you as the player choose to run ahead or to abandon Jess, that is terrible. I feel like Matt wouldn't do that as a person. He wouldn't do that. So I hate that's an option. So in the movie, if Matt lives and he finds Jess, I don't think that Matt would do anything to abandon her. Like, that's crazy. Like, he lost Emily. Why would he then intentionally do things to lose Jess? She's still his friend. In the game, he is played by Jordan Fisher, who's probably the other most recognizable face from this game. And I think this was probably like one of my introductions to Jordan Fisher. This is like kind of right around Teen Beach movies and stuff. And I was like, oh, hey, I know this guy. But I really like Jordan Fisher, and I think he does a good job as Matt. It's so funny though, because when you look at Matt, that's clearly Jordan Fisher's face for sure, but it's definitely like not his body type. Like, Jordan Fisher is a small dude. Matt is huge. I think Matt's like the tallest person in their friend group, and that is definitely not Jordan Fisher. It's hilarious. But I think Jordan Fisher does a really good job. Everybody does a good job in this game, but he does a really good job. The motion capture, the facial expressions for Matt, a lot of the emotions that Matt goes through, especially like during the police interviews when he's like really angry or talking about like what's happening with Emily. I think he does a really good job as that. And I think that whoever plays Matt in the movie needs to be like a gentle giant kind of guy. Like, he doesn't have to be a big guy, but he needs to be like a gentle jock, And so whoever plays Matt would need to be kind of like the strong, silent type in a way, protective guy. So I chose Chosen Jacobs, who I only know from It so far. He's been in other things, but I haven't really watched them yet. And he played a similar part, kind of, because Mike Hanlon doesn't really join the group until a lot later in the story, but he also doesn't have a ton to do. But when he does, he's like the one who has he's like the strongest of the group. And so he's the one who has a lot of like strength about him. So I feel like that's great to have for Mike. He's not as big at Mike. It's so hard because Mike, bro, he has a lot of the qualities, or he would be able to play a lot of the qualities that Matt has in the game. So far, nobody has been cast that I think would play Matt. Out of the two guys, I wouldn't pick either one of them. So as far as I know, Matt hasn't been cast yet. So Chosen Jacobs is my choice for Matt. So we are almost at the end of these characters. So next we have Hannah and Beth Washington. And Beth is the youngest of the Washington kids. Her and Hannah are twins. And basically Beth is the first person in the game that we control because she's the one you play through the tutorial prologue part of the game. And we aren't shown much about Beth. She doesn't get a little character introduction. So we don't know really much about her or her personality. We don't really know how close she is to anybody in the friend group, because we know Sam is Hannah's best friend, but we don't really know how close Beth is to anybody else. But it does seem like that Beth probably is just really likable and everybody likes her, but we don't really know how close she is to anybody else. And I feel like that we need to see more of her in the beginning of the movie. Obviously Beth's death is unavoidable because she dies no matter what you do in the game, but I do think that it's important in the beginning of this movie, in the flashback or the opening of the movie, to kind of give her a little bit more character so we can see who she is more as a person. And I think the same thing kind of goes for Hannah. So Hannah, we do get to kind of learn more about Hannah as the game goes on, because characters get to find her journals, be in her rooms, or because she was Sam's best friend, they tend to talk more about Hannah as a person Then they talk about Beth. Like, Beth, I feel like gets left behind a lot in the story. Even during the little seance scene where Ashley, Chris, and Josh are using the Ouija board, she's the one doing it, and so she can choose to either call out for Beth or call out for Hannah, but it doesn't matter who you pick because the outcome is the same. It doesn't really matter. So we're told that Hannah's a little bit more shy, naive, and trusting, maybe compared to Beth, and that her biggest plot point that we see of her is that she has a big crush on Mike to the point that it's obsessive. And we learn this throughout the game as we find like her journal, and I think we even see like a magazine result where she did like a compatibility quiz, and I'm pretty sure the result was that her and Mike were not compatible. But I also think in the quiz, that also a part that says that you need to do something big to get your crush's attention. So I think this has been a theory, I think that she ran out into the snow after being embarrassed from the prank to hopefully get Mike to chase after her, but of course he didn't. Beth chased after her, because like, why would you run out in the snow without anything on, Hannah? Like, you this is your lodge, you go there often with your family, you know it's freaking cold. Why would you run out in the snow without a jacket on, girl? So I think that she ran out into the snow hoping that Mike would come after her, but girl, he doesn't like you like that, so why would he do that? So Beth goes after Hannah in the snow. She ends up losing her phone. There's something out there because Hannah runs pretty far from the lodge, so they're basically lost out there. The snow is snowing. They see fire in the distance. They're hearing sounds. They're being chased by something, so they're running. Beth loses her phone, and then they get to the cliff edge and they end up falling. Well, technically Hannah falls because she keeps backing up and ends up dragging Beth down with her. So now Beth is holding on to this root that's off of the mountain, and she's holding on to Hannah. Beth is strong. Like, Beth is very clearly strong. And so we see this mysterious person trying to like reach for them. So you don't know if this person, whoever it is trying to hurt them or help them. So Beth gets the decision to either to drop Hannah or to let go. And the outcome is the same. If she chooses to let go of Hannah, Hannah just falls first, but Beth still falls and breaks her back on this rock. I wish that in the game, because they can't, in the movie, it doesn't really matter. I wish in the game that if you choose to drop Hannah, that when you fall as Beth, because you fall regardless, that is when you hit your back on the rock. But if you choose to let go, that she doesn't hit that rock, she still dies. Like, she still, like, I guess, hurts herself or whatever. Her hitting that rock is so rough. And I just feel like dropping Hannah is like a worse choice than letting go. I feel like it should be slightly different, but I guess it doesn't really matter because she dies anyway. So she dies. Hannah ends up surviving. I think she like hurts her leg or whatever, but she ends up surviving, and she's trapped down in the mines. And so even though there's a major search party going on, no one thinks to check the mines. I guess I don't know if they realize the mines are still there or whatever. So Hannah is basically down there for however long, and she's starving. She keeps a journal because Sam can find the journal later, and she ends up digging up, she buries Beth because Beth dies, and then she ends up digging up Beth and eats Beth to survive. And because we learned that the Wendigo spirit is always on the mountain, because this mountain is an indigenous mountain and the Wendigos is part of like indigenous folklore, you only turn into a Wendigo if you commit cannibalism, because the Wendigo spirits are always on the mountain and you can't be possessed by one unless you commit cannibalism. So because Hannah committed cannibalism by eating Beth to survive, she ends up becoming possessed by the biggest Wendigo, the Macapichu, I think it's called. And the Macapichu Wendigo is actually the one that the flamethrower guy, the stranger, was killing on the mountain, because the Macapichu was the Wendigo that was chasing after the girls. So it's like a whole thing. It's kind of cool that she was being chased by that thing and then gets possessed by the spirit of that thing. So it's crazy. That's why Hannah is so much bigger than all the other Wendigos in the game, because she's the big one. We don't really know if Hannah exactly keeps her faculties as a person, because it's like, why is she going out of her way to kill these people like this? But I do think that she has some of her memory, or at least, like, even though she's a monster now, there's still those feelings toward these people, because she definitely treats, the way she kills Jess and Emily in particular, and even Matt, because Matt is the one holding the camera, is pretty rough. So I don't know, she probably still does remember, but she ends up killing Sam. Like, she can kill Sam at the end, and she can kill Mike. So it's kind of like, how much does she, as the Wendigo, know of her, like, her past life? So I don't know. Either way, we don't get to see Hannah and Beth as people for that long, because Hannah becomes the villain, but she's a monster. Hannah only dies in the lodge because Sam either blows up the lodge by flipping the light switch, or Mike kamikazes himself and blows up the lodge with his lighter. So that is how Hannah dies. Again, I want to see them have a little bit more as people before they die and before they become Wendigos in the beginning of the movie. I think it'd be good to see them interacting with other characters more before the prank. See them interact with Josh, because we don't see them interact with Josh at all. Hannah and Beth are played by Ella Lentini, and I think she's fine as both of them. Like, she is the same face, but they do make them look different. It's like they're twins, but they look different. It's cool. We don't get to see her a ton, obviously, because, you know, of what happens. I think the best sequence though for her is in Josh's hallucination. I think that was really good acting from her. So whoever plays Hannah and Beth, hopefully they get a little bit more to do in the movie, but it needs to be, unless they find twins, they would need to find a person who can play both girls and make them be very different people, who can play the protective sister from Beth, even though she's the younger sister, to this protectiveness of her, but then also like this shy naivety, but also the hallucinations of them for Josh later. So that's important. I chose Ivantika, who I have only seen her in Mean Girl so far. I knew that the Washingtons, so Hannah, Beth, and Josh, would be hard to cast, but I ended up casting Josh first, and so I was like, well, whoever I pick for Josh, I need Hannah and Beth to kind of look like they could be his sisters. And so I ended up landing on Ivantika because I thought she stood out to me in the Mean Girls movie. Like, she was a standout to me. I don't know, I feel like she would be fun. She's gorgeous, and I think that she could play both girls very, very well, and I think that she would have fun playing up creepy for Josh's hallucination. And I would love to see Hannah and Beth interact with Sam and with the other friends and with Josh more in the movie. So for the official cast that's been announced, I think Ella Rubin would be the one to play Hannah and Beth. I can potentially see her playing somebody else, but I feel like when I looked her up, I said, oh, she's probably playing Hannah and Beth. I feel like that just makes the most sense to me anyway. I'm not familiar with her, but I do like her look, and I do think that just off of her look that she would play Hannah and Beth. But if she's not playing Hannah and Beth, then get Ivantika. That'd be fun. So, all right, last but not least, Josh Washington. So if you're still with me, thank you so much. I appreciate it. You should go ahead and drop a like on this video, as well as subscribe to the channel, because you're still with me. That's amazing. I appreciate it so much. So last but not least, we have Josh Washington. And Josh is described as thoughtful, loving, and complex, and he is Hannah and Beth's older brother. And I think Josh is probably my favorite character in the game, and I'm probably a little biased because he's played by Rami Malek, who is the reason why I even found this game in the first place. But I do think Josh is the most complicated and nuanced character in the game, and I feel like that he's just so interesting, and he's so the epitome of a tortured, tragic character. And what he does in the game is definitely messed up, and he for sure needs help, but I can't help but feel sorry for him. And I think that Rami Malek does such a good job. I'm getting ahead of myself. I think he does such a good job with Josh that whoever plays him in the movie needs to be able to do the same thing. So with Josh, he describes himself as a healer. He has plans that he hopes will push his friends closer together. He goes through this whole prank thing to make Chris be out to be a hero, because he hears Chris talk about Ashley and how he likes her all this time, but he hasn't made a move. So Josh is like, well, I'll make the move for you by, you know, making you out to be a hero. And he does it in like the most crazy way by putting his best friend and his other friend, who's the girl, his best friend, like through some traumatizing stuff. And not to mention, like I said before, I do kind of low-key ship Josh and Sam, but he also put Sam through some crazy stuff too. So it's kind of hard to talk about Josh and not kind of talk about him like he's a villain, because he is, but he also is sad. It's so sad. And we see a lot of interactions with him at the beginning of the game where he's funny, he's compassionate, he wants to have a good time, he wants good vibes. He clearly is very affected by what happened to his sisters, calls his friends back a year later to hopefully like honor their memory. So when you go into the game, into the story, you're like, oh, he's doing this to honor his sister's memory, even though we don't know officially if they're dead. They're just still missing, even though it's been a year. So it's like, oh, they're probably dead. But it's just like, I don't know. He's such a complicated character. And he just seems to have like really lost it after. Like, he was so affected by the loss of Hannah and Beth. And we learn throughout the game, through conversations with Josh and by exploration, I think from Chris too, that Mr. Washington is a film producer or whatever. And so there's a lot of like movie trinkets in the lodge, and that they're rich, but him and Josh don't have a great relationship. And Josh kind of tells you this in a sequence with Sam in the basement. But this also informs that why Josh is able to do the things he does as the Psycho, because he has knowledge of special effects and movies and props, and clearly is a big movie lover because he quotes movies, Godspeed Pilgrim. Clearly a movie guy, which is why he's able to do all this stuff, which is hilarious to me though, because it's like, when did he set all this stuff up? Because he had to go and rig like jump scares, he has to go rig like the lights and the gates, and he goes to the lift station. He's all over the place. It's really crazy. I already kind of went through his pranks earlier, so I don't want to really go through them again, but I do think that it's important for the movie to kind of give us a bit more on Josh as a character, because he is the reason why they're back there at the lodge. He's the reason, like, he feels so responsible for what happened. I think it's important that he gets a lot of care as a character. We also learn that he is struggling from depression, and there's a sequence where if Sam manages to escape the Psycho, then she ends up going through his lair, and she finds his phone where there's text messages between him and Dr. Hill, which then tells you that, oh, Josh is probably the person who Dr. Hill is talking to. Because during each chapter, I didn't talk about this because it's kind of like not really important, but between each chapter, you as the player are playing as this faceless person who is talking to Peter Stormare's Dr. Hill, and you basically, I think in this sequence, if you manage to make it this far, you learn that that's probably Josh. And if you didn't make this sequence, then you do officially find it out later. So you find out that he's being treated for depression, but as the game goes on, you see there's other things going on other than depression that he's not being treated for. And I think that, and that thing is schizophrenia, and he's being treated for depression but not schizophrenia, which is a worse condition. He blames himself for not being awake to help his sisters because he was drunk with Chris, and it's probably part of the reason why he does prank Chris, because maybe he blames him a little bit too. Like, I don't know. I didn't say this in Chris's part, but there is a line where Chris, when he's talking to Ashley, he makes it seem like that he was involved with the prank too, even though we see him passed out with Josh. So there's been speculation that, oh, maybe Chris was tasked to keep Josh distracted by getting him drunk, but I hate that idea. So I hated that line was in the game, because it's like, Chris, you didn't have anything to do with the prank. So I just wanted to throw that in there, but maybe he blames Chris a little bit too for getting him drunk. I don't know. Basically is a catalyst for everything that's going on, because he brings everybody to the mountain. Of course, he doesn't know that Hannah is now a Wendigo. He doesn't know any of this stuff that's happening. He just brought them here because he wanted to humiliate them in the same way that they humiliated Hannah the year before. His story is so sad to me. Like, that's why I think he's such a nuanced and complicated character. So moving right into his death. So Josh only has 2 outcomes in this game, and it makes me very sad that he only has 2 outcomes, and both of them I think are bad endings for him. Basically, once it's revealed that he's the Psycho, you see him unravel mentally. So Chris and Mike take him out to a shed, and depending on your decisions as Chris, whether Chris chose to save Ashley or Josh during that little Saw game, that Josh's dialogue will be different. He does make some little jokes that I feel like is cringy now and is cringy then about the girls. I feel like they don't have to keep in the movie, but it just kind of shows just how much he's really unraveling. So depending on what Chris chose, whether he chose to save Josh or save Ashley, then Josh's dialogue will be different in this sequence, to Chris anyway. But he ends up getting left in the shed, and the Handigo finds him and takes him down to the mine. So everybody goes to the mine to find him because he has the lift key. And the Handigo ends up dropping him into the mines, and Mike and Sam end up meeting up, and they end up finding Josh. If Sam finds Hannah's journal for them to find out that Hannah is a Wendigo, then this is how we know Josh will at least not die. If you don't find the journal, then Josh will die. Because if you find the journal, when Sam and Mike find Josh in the mines, Josh is having an episode where he's hallucinating, and this is the only time of the game that you actually play as Josh knowingly. Because like I said, those little chapter breaks where you're with Dr. Hill, you are playing as Josh, but you don't really know that. It's kind of more like you, the player, as opposed to you, the player, as Josh. So this is the only sequence where you actually get to play Josh. So you play him like for maximum 5 minutes, if that. So when Sam and Mike find Josh and Sam found the journal, then she'll tell Josh Hannah is the Wendigo. And so when Mike and Josh try to go back the way that Sam and Mike came, because Sam decides to rock climb out of there, then the Handigo will pull Mike underwater. She'll pop out and grab Josh, and Josh will recognize Hannah's tattoo, which throughout the game, they basically are forcing us to realize that Hannah had a butterfly tattoo. So he'll recognize her tattoo and he'll be like, Hannah. And then I guess the Handigo recognizes him and she takes him deeper into the mines while Mike is hiding from them. If this happens, then Josh is left in the mines because everybody else manages to escape because Mike tells Sam that the Handigo took him. And so at the end of the credits, we cut back to Josh in the mines and he is now feasting on the head of the stranger who Handigo killed earlier with Chris. And so because cannibalism, Josh is now, oh my gosh, Josh is now being turned into a Wendigo. So that's his ending. So the cycle basically continues. If Sam does not find the journal, she still rock climbs out of there and then him and Mike are going back the way they came. The Handigo pops out of the water, attacks Mike briefly, and then attacks Josh. And because he doesn't recognize her, the Handigo pops his head like a blueberry, basically. So Josh only has two endings. He either dies because he doesn't recognize his sister, or he recognizes her, but the cycle continues and he becomes a Wendigo. It sucks. Either way, I think it's really sad that he's the only character who doesn't have the chance to survive, and it just really sucks. People could look at it like, oh, it's comeuppance because what he did to his friends was so bad, but to me, it's kind of like he is struggling. Like, yes, what he did was shitty, but he just really needs help. It just sucks that he doesn't get a chance to survive to get the help that he needs, because if he turns into a Wendigo, he's going to turn into a Wendigo. There's no way to save him, at least as far as we know. There's no way to save him, and if he dies, he dies, and he dies in a horrible way. So it's really sad. It's really sad to me. He's such a tragic figure. Like, he's so... He is played spectacularly by Rami Malek, who I've been a fan of since Night at the Museum, the first one. I love Rami Malek. I'm a huge fan. And I think he does such a good job as Josh. Complicated character that he is. The turmoil that he clearly is facing. The detachment that he has. The soft moments he has with Sam. Moments where he's angry at his friends, what they did to his sisters. When he's angry at Chris, if Chris chose to save Ashley instead of him. All of these emotions that Josh goes through in this game. You know, being scary as the psycho and all this stuff like that. Rami Malek does such a good job as Josh. It's just like, it's so good, and it's gonna be really hard to top him. I think like you really need to have an actor who is going to be able to be just as nuanced as Rami Malek was as Josh. And because to me, Josh is one of the best written characters in the game, I'm going to be looking pretty critically at who plays him, because I think it's important that this person who plays Josh needs to be able to be a little creepy, a little unsettling, a little bit of a weirdo, but also at the same time be tragic, be sad, garner sympathy, be someone who you can see was at one point he was a healthier person than he is now. And I feel like those are things you need to be able to see in whoever plays him. And so with that said, I knew it was going to be so hard for me to find somebody who I liked for Josh. I ended up finding Tenzin Norgay Trainer, and I've never seen him in anything, but I was like, I really like his face. He's a very interesting face, and I think Rami Malek has a very interesting face, a very handsome face. And so I wanted to find somebody similar, and so I was like, well, this guy's an interesting face. I ended up watching that On My Block spinoff Free Ridge because Tenzin is in it, and I liked him immediately. Like, I kept watching the show because of his character. I feel like the characters in that show were like, woof, but I liked him. I was sold on him pretty early, and I was like, I think he'd be great as Josh. I feel like that he has the ability, and just from that one show, to be nuanced for Josh, and I think that he'd be great for Josh. And I feel like that him and Avantika, they look like they could be siblings. Not all siblings look exactly alike, but I feel like that they look like they could be related, in my opinion. Going off of who's been cast so far, like I said, Michael Cimino is the other male so far who's been casted, and I feel like they probably could be the one playing Josh. If that's the case, then him and Ella Rubin, who I'm assuming would be playing the twins, would be playing siblings, and I feel like looking at them, I don't see like a family resemblance. I see one with her and potentially Belmont Camelli, who I think would be playing Mike. So it's kind of hard to say. So I'll be very interested to see who these people so far who's been casted, like who they're playing. So just to remind you who I picked for these characters. So for Ashley, I picked Amy Beth McNulty, but I think that Odessa Azion is probably going to be playing her in the movie. For Emily, I picked Lily Chi, but I think it's pretty clear Ji Young Yu will be playing her in the movie. For Sam, I picked Mia Isaac, and I think that Maya Mitchell is probably the closest person to play Sam in the movie. For Chris, I picked Wyatt Olaf, and I don't think either of the guys they have announced so far will be playing Chris. For Jess, I picked Meg Donnelly, and I don't think anybody they have so far will be playing Jess unless Maya Mitchell will be playing Jess. Then we have Mike, and I picked Asher Angel, but I think that Belmont Cameli will be playing him. For Matt, I picked Chosen Jacobs, and I don't think anybody they've said so far will be playing Matt. For Beth and Hannah, I picked Avantika, but I think Ella Rubin from the announced cast will be playing the twins. And then lastly, for Josh, I picked Tenzing Norgay Trainer, and I think that Michael Cimino might be playing Josh out of the announced cast. So that's it. Oh my gosh, I talked so much. Fan casting takes so much. And so I hope you enjoyed this video, like as much as I'm doing the casting. I think fan casting is always really fun for me. So thank you so much for watching this video. Please drop in the comments who you think the announced cast will be playing in the movie. And also let me know like who you would have liked to have seen play these characters. And don't just make it easy and say the original cast should have reprised their roles. I already said why they shouldn't. Okay, don't go the easy route. Pick people, okay? So be sure to like and subscribe, hit that bell to get notifications for when I post more videos, and as always, I'll catch you in the next video. Bye.